Hey, this is Heather Langenkamp from the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and you are listening to the Don't Go Out There podcast.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. We just want to thank all our fans and listeners. We really appreciate all the support. It means the world to us. And we always like to bring you guys some awesome interviews with the icons of the horror genre. Today we are joined by an absolute legend in the business with over 50 plus credits to her name as actress, writer, and director in a career that spans nearly 40 years. Most known for her iconic role as Nancy in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, Heather Langenkamp. It's an absolute honor. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great, and thanks for having me.
Oh, no. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate this. Just to kick this off, we're just going to ask, how'd you get into acting?
Well, I got into acting by a fluke, really. I mean, I loved acting. I had acted in high school and really loved it, but didn't know how to get into it professionally. And then in my hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Francis Ford Coppola made 2 films the summer before I went to college. And I went down to the casting office and took a picture and did a small interview for the casting director, Janet Hershenson. And I got to be an extra in The Outsiders, and then I got a speaking role in Rumblefish and got my SAG card. So that was it. And once I got my SAG card, I happened to be going to college at Stanford in California, so it made it easy to, fly down to Los Angeles for auditions. Right. Janet Hershenson really helped me get an agent, and all the hard things that you have to do.
And obviously, you're so ingrained and embedded in the horror genre now between your roles, acting, and your involvement, and you and your husband's special effects company. Were you a fan of horror growing up, or is that something that came after you acted in the genre?
It's so funny because it's never been like my favorite genre. It never still isn't, unfortunately. Right. I wish it were because I'm just surrounded by so many talented people in that field. But my brain just doesn't really love to get scared. I don't like it. I don't look out for it. I think, in a lot of ways, I've just been in really scary situations in my life, just, where you find yourself, that I don't like to be scared on top of that. So I don't know why people do. You could answer a few questions from me about that. I don't get it. I don't get it sometimes, especially in how scary the world is today.
Right.
To add another little layer, maybe it's a way of people dealing with fear, which is a kind of how I've come to think about it, is that to deal with your own fear, it helps to watch scary movies because you get to, in a pretend situation, get to handle it, and then you walk out with maybe more skills than you used to have. So I've come to think that that's probably why people like it.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're accurate on that one. I'm pretty sure.
Everyone in my family hates the sight of blood. Like, it's really ironic. Both my sister and my husband, if you cut your finger, they're like swooning in the background. They do not like the sight of blood. So it's very strange that our family is now known for this, being in this genre.
So speaking of that, we've had Robert and Jay Zhu on from the original Nightmare too, and we've asked kind of them the same question. But could you tell us, how did you score that role in original Nightmare? I mean, how did you go from an extra in the iconic Outsiders, like you talked about, to obviously the role you're most known for as Nancy?
Well, back in 1983 and 84 and 85, it was such a big time for young actors. You had the Brat Pack, you had all these movies featuring young people. So Hollywood is really looking for a lot of young people, in their late teens, early 20s to fill all these roles. And television, was getting, more shows with kids in them. And so that was like one of the reasons why it was easier to get auditions, I think, for someone like me who didn't have a lot of experience. Looking around, a lot of women and men didn't have any experience. I mean,
Right.
I'd maybe done a movie of the week and a couple of after school specials and, some commercials. So there wasn't a lot of expectation that anybody had a lot of experience. And these kinds of roles in independent films, like Nightmare on Elm Street, they just put out a cattle call. And if your agent saw, oh, they're looking for a 16, 17-year-old girl, she would have sent in every client that she had that would fit that role. So probably a lot of people had their pictures submitted to get that part. Like in the old days, the agents had your actual headshots in piles, and they would,
Oh yeah.
put them in,
Absolutely.
have a messenger on a bike, like send them over to the casting agent, or it was just a totally different time. And then the casting agent would open the envelope and just sort through the pictures and say, oh, she looks good. It was very much based on just how you looked in your photo. And
Wow.
I got an audition, which was great, and had a couple of callbacks. And then Wes, in the final callback, just said, congratulations, you get the job. So it was
That's
really
awesome.
exciting.
Well, the movie wouldn't have been the same without you. I'm just gonna let you know now.
I hope not. I mean, I feel like I gave my all in that role. I did everything I could to be the best I could possibly be, and I'm really proud of it.
So you obviously you worked with the late Wes Craven multiple times. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences working with him? Obviously he became such an icon in the business, and you got to work with him at the start of it, and at the later on in his career with New Nightmare, which basically laid the groundwork for Scream and stuff like that. So could you talk a little bit about your experiences working with him?
Yeah, I was so lucky because I got to work with a filmmaker who really was just starting out, but he was extremely confident. He never ever doubted his own ideas or his own vision. He always had something really strong, some strong idea, which, now that I've had more experience, is rare. A lot of directors come off really strong, like they know what they're doing, but when you actually see the final product, it's like not like sometimes you're just disappointed, like it didn't turn out as well as you thought it would. But with Wes, I mean, his vision was always right on and really scary. He could set up the set in a way that was, very dynamic. The actors were always, really motivated to do their best work for him, which is something that is hard to achieve, to have all your actors be right there for you,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
day long and all night long. And we would do anything for him. We just loved him, and he was kind of weird, and we were protective of him because he was an interesting, weird kind of guy, and
Right.
he was not your normal Hollywood director, that's for sure. And so all of us over the years, and even the producers that worked with him, they were always trying to get him, in the most comfortable position where he could do his best work. And I was lucky to work with him for three films.
Heather, I want to ask you a quick follow up to that before Mike's going to ask you about your special effects crew. But in 1984 was your first role as Nancy. Then in 1994 you played yourself in New Nightmare. What was the difference in approach that you took between 1984 and 1994? I'm just curious on
I'm
that.
so glad you asked that, by the way.
Well, the biggest event of my life happened, you know, about 3 years earlier. I had a baby, and Nancy was this teenager who was really strong and, a girl in many
Right.
ways, turning into a woman. Like you're really getting the sense that she's going to walk out of that movie either, and be a woman. She just
Right.
went through all that. And Wes really wanted to make this very clear that Nancy was even taking over for her mother and like babying her mother in a way, right? So the
Right.
whole role reversed in that movie. And then Wes wrote New Nightmare, and after I had a baby, like you just can't even believe how different you feel as a woman in the world. You just feel more powerful, which is hard to believe because Nancy was so powerful, but that you have this huge responsibility to take care of your baby and make sure you're protecting it no matter what. You have this, I always call it your mama bear instinct. Just, I don't know where it comes from. It just comes in. Literally, you would kill somebody for your child, right? So that happened to me. And I know Wes, he was very familiar. He had kids of his own. That's in every woman, and in some degree. And he wrote a script that actually really showcased that feeling in a horror movie. The true, like, my through line was, I have to protect my baby. Like, I have to take care of him and make sure Freddie doesn't get him. And that was such an easy part to play for me. It was very natural. I automatically could understand everything Wes was trying to get out in that, and all the things that you will do, even die for your child. And so that was just always in the background, and I love that role for that reason, because I was able to show one kind of character grow up and become this other kind of woman. And not many people in filmland get to do that.
Absolutely right.
By the way, New Nightmare is one of my personal favorites. But so talk to us a little bit about your transition into special effects. We knew you were heavily involved in it as far back as the Dawn of the Dead remake. That's one of Brian's favorite movies. And then you can transition into your work with Cabin in the Woods, which is one of my favorite movies. So I love the effects in that movie. The merman is great. Everything in that movie is so cool.
You love that.
I do.
It's related because, having my own kids, I had to make a lot of really tough choices. And, you can't have it all. I know you just can't. I couldn't get good work and keep my kids at home and be there for them and make them dinner, and I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do.
Right.
And plus, when you're in your mid 30s as a actress, your career often takes this really sad dip. Just the parts out there are mainly for girls in their 20s, or women in their 20s, or women in their 50s. There's this huge kind of wasteland. At least in the 90s there was. Now I don't think it's as bad. But it was really hard to even find a role for a mid 30s kind of character. So after having some really depressing auditions for really small parts that I'd always joke with my agent, like, does this part have a name, or are they just taking number 3, and so I decided I can give that up for now, and I'll go on to location with David, which was in Canada. So that meant, moving our whole family up to Canada, getting a house in Canada, taking our dogs to Canada. And to make it worth it, I really needed to work on the show. This was Dawn of the Dead. So I needed to make a job for myself with David. And so I became the coordinator for the shop, which meant that, I helped people fill out their paperwork when they got hired. I kept the books. I met with the producers about the budget. I would do the scheduling and hire all the artists to be on set. And I was never a makeup artist. I was always an actor. So, I was always really jealous. Like, anytime an actor would come in to get a live cast, I was like, oh, why can't that be me? I would love to play that part. And, watching Sarah Polley be that character, which I just thought was such a great role. And so deep down, I'm deeply jealous of all these leading ladies.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so I was pretty good at it, and I do like leading groups of people. I've always been that kind of a person who likes to solve problems. And so my husband and I realized we had a pretty good relationship that way. And so we just kept at it. And after, we did lots of different movies, but I'd say that Cabin in the Woods was the next really big movie that we did. And it was a huge, huge undertaking. Where Dawn of the Dead had massive amounts of extras. They were all pretty much wearing very similar makeup. Made a lot of zombie makeups, and that David kind of invented that look of the zombies, that they look like they 5 days decayed.
Right.
They get 10 days decayed, and then 3 years decayed. They're like just constantly decaying with that palette of really grody yellow and dead looking skin. So we just made tons of makeups like that. And then we had the few features of the little girl with no lips and a few of those, like Ving Rhames' arm and the pregnant Lily. Like there were some big featured makeups in that as well, but a lot of zombies. So it was managing a ton of extras, like hundreds of extras on a day. How are you going to get them in makeup? How are you going to spray them with vomit? How are you going to, do it? So that was my 14 canisters of blood and 16 canisters of vomit and planning and getting the supplies and running downtown in my car to buy stuff. So I was that gal, And then with Cabin in the Woods, it was all these different characters. They all had to be original. They couldn't. They were like kind of looking back to the classic age of Hollywood's monsters, but then they had to be very different. So we hired a huge crew, and all were incredibly talented. Had them in a big shop in Burbank. I don't know. We probably had a payroll that was like 50 or 60 people.
Wow.
At one time. It was really a lot of work. I actually hired my sister-in-law to help, like do payroll, and it was just nonstop work until we got all that stuff up to Canada, where they shot it in Canada. And then my husband moved up there and worked for several months, and I didn't go. But on that movie is when I decided to make my own film, I Am Nancy, because I was so like hidden under all the paperwork of this movie that I kind of lost my sense of being, an actor, being Nancy. And one day I called Wes Craven's office just to see if he wanted to go see a film. They were showing Nightmare on Elm Street somewhere. And his secretary said, Heather, what? Can you please spell your last name?
Oh, no.
Okay, and I spelled my last name, and then I hung up the phone, and I kind of, like, a tear formed in my eye, like, look what's happened, And my sister-in-law said, no, you are Nancy, and you just have to pick yourself up, and we're going to make this movie, and I'm going to show you, my sister-in-law was like, I'm going to show you that you are, really important to a lot of people. And so we embarked on the I Am Nancy project, and over that year, it basically took a year to make, I got this sense of just not only admiration for my fans, but I really learned how important Nancy Thompson is to so many people in the world. And that was a big, big turning point that for me I really owe it to Arlene Marischal, who made that movie with me, because she just kicked me in the butt and just said, you got to get out from under this mentality that you're nobody,
Shifting gears a little bit, can you talk about your role in Portal? I know it came out recently, and it sounds like a really cool premise if you just want to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so a good friend of mine told me about this movie he was producing, and I said, that sounds great. I love that part. It's it's a woman who suffered, her whole family gets kind of killed by the dad, but really he's saving them from this evil demon that's going to possess their souls, basically. So she survives and lives to tell about it. And these other folks are approaching the house where all of this happened to her, and she serves as this warning, and they don't listen, obviously. They never do. And then she has to help them get out of this possession that's going to take over all of their souls. So it's a very traditional movie of a haunted house kind of idea with the demon. And I was really grateful to get a part like that, because it was tough, and she was smart, and she was, with the kids. I mean, it's the kind of part that I hope I get to play more of. And the movie was just beautiful, and I haven't been really following how it's doing out there, but all the kids that we worked with, Ryan Merriman and I'm gonna forget everybody's name now, but I'll look it up. They were all such good actors that I did feel a little bit insecure, I have to say. They were all so good. They were really good.
All right, Heather. The other day, whenever Brian and Mike told me the news that we were getting Heather Langenkamp on the show, I was kind of shocked at first. Had to get my stomach, my heart out of my stomach. But a question that instantly came to my mind is Nancy Thompson is known as one of the greatest quote unquote final girls in horror history. And like you said, you worked on Cabin in the Woods with another legendary final girl, Sigourney Weaver, Ellen Ripley, and Anna Hutchison. Honestly, she was I can't remember her exact title, but she was Lyta in the final season of Spartacus. She was a very strong woman as well. Who are some of your favorite final girls, final women in horror, or anything in general?
Well, Sigourney Weaver is just probably tops on my list.
Mm-hmm.
Though I have to say that Jennifer Lawrence is one of them too.
There you go.
I think that um, I think that her role in Mockingbird and what's the name of the series?
The Hunger Games.
Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games. Yeah, her role in the Hunger Games to me is so close to Nancy in terms of the way that she had to solve all of her, all of the challenges being presented to her, and also she just had to be such a fighter, even more so than Nancy. All of the physical work that she had to do in that role, to me, I admire. When I saw that movie, it blew me away. So I would say, of course, all the Alien movies, and I even think Judy Garland in Wizard of Oz is such an inspiration.
Right.
Oh yeah.
There's really not that many women that I see that don't blow me away. I mean, God, Danielle Harris and all of my colleagues, Amanda Wiss, whenever I see them approach their roles, I feel like they're way better than me, actually. I never feel like I'm as good as any of them. And I feel I still have work to do to do some, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis. You just never look at yourself in the same league as them. I never do anyway. I just still feel like I'm a beginner.
Well, trust me. Everybody else looks at you in the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I know. I feel like I hope I hope I get another chance. I always feel like I can do better. I know I can. I can be better. Or I can just add another layer. I can add another dimension to this idea of the final girl. But I was going to say earlier, but I didn't get to say, is part of being a final girl is just the recognition that women can play certain kinds of parts. And it was happening in the 70s and the 80s because everybody was giving women the chance to do things they had never done before. And Wes Craven was groundbreaking in making Nancy's character as strong as she was. But in general, my work in the makeup effects industry has really challenged me to bring women into makeup effects. Because when I started being involved back in, 1990 or so, we didn't have any women crew members except for the women who would help us with our wigs and maybe laying feathers and fur and things like that have been traditionally occupied by women in this field. But Dave and we really worked hard to have 50% women in our shop, and we achieved it when we worked on American Horror Story and Freak Show, and then later on with Hotel. We would have 50-50, and it made such a difference in our shop to have equality and, trying to help women actually get, equal pay is like kind of the next struggle, which, was probably years away. But I was just thinking about it today because not just playing roles, we actually have to institute this idea of stronger women in our workplaces. And so I'm really striving to do that. And I think Dave and I probably have the only shop in town that has 50% women, and we're really proud of that.
It's great.
Absolutely, and you should be. That's awesome. We 100% agree with you on that. Okay, you spoke a little line, and we didn't.
You guys don't have any women on your crew here, so I'm gonna help.
Hey, the more the merrier. We've interviewed a ton though, and
I know you're doing your part.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned, or you kind of spoke a little line there, and it got my brain going a little bit, got the gears turning. So I have to ask, since we have you, if the right director, the right script, the right place and time, would you play Nancy Thompson again?
Yeah, without a question, I would. I would have to. I mean, I know that there's so much more that Nancy could,
Right.
many more adventures that she could have. I really think that people approach me all the time telling me they're trying to think of that idea. And, so I'm curious that it hasn't happened yet sometimes, and the fact that it hasn't happened makes me lose heart because that train of remakes and reboots and it
Right.
seems like it's already left the station. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but I certainly would do it. Yeah.
Well, we're hoping with Halloween in 2018 and
Yeah.
with this new Scream, we're kind of getting maybe
Yeah.
the gears will start turning for something to happen. We hope for
And
it.
it's a credit to Wes Craven's idea and his career that very few people I think should
Right.
feel qualified to take on that subject. I
Right.
don't know whether there's fear that to dishonor his legacy
Right.
might be part of it because when they made the other reboot, he was still alive.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
They were a little different.
Yep. Yep.
So now he's gone, and I think there's a sense of really big shoes to fill that might scare a lot of people off.
As it should. As it
Yep.
should.
Yeah.
Those are big shoes to fill for sure. So, a quick question. We started asking this a while back with some of our other guests, and we just kind of like to see everyone's experience. You've done some horror cons and conventions and stuff like that. What is maybe the best encounter you've ever had, the strangest encounter you've ever had? Something along those lines, whichever story you'd like to tell.
Well, there's so many different kinds of flavors of. Uh, there's the kind of interaction you have with somebody who has been really wounded in their
Right.
own,
Yep.
and they let you know that that you helped them because of the role that you played, and you gave them a pathway out of whatever difficulty that they were experiencing. And
Absolutely.
it's I can name 20 different kinds of traumas and terrible experiences that people have told me they've survived with the help of Nancy's
That's
like
awesome.
kind of guidance. So that kind of
That's right.
interaction is touching. It also makes me usually very sad
Of
because
course.
you see how poorly some children are taken care of and
Yep.
how violent our world is, and all of those bad things in the world kind of show themselves in those stories.
Absolutely.
But then there's also meeting vets who have a copy of Nightmare on the base and wherever, or in these really small and out of the way places where they feel so isolated and alone and lonely for America, and then they'll tell you that they like to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, and that makes them feel like really charged up and really happy, and like those. I really love those stories.
Those are awesome. That's awesome.
And I think the final story is like that I really love is how generations of kids and their grandparents, or a niece and an uncle,
Right.
or a grandparent and their grandkid would bond over the movies. Like that was the way to talk to each other intergenerationally. That's the third way that I enjoy hearing about it. And there's no story that I don't love to hear. I mean,
Right.
making I Am Nancy, I got to hear such great stories. I wish I could have put them all in the movie.
And it's funny that last answer sounds a lot like Robert Englund's answer, which was the fact that Nightmare on Elm Street just keeps spanning across multiple generations. So that's kind of
Right.
cool.
Absolutely.
Just met my first great grandmother and great grandbaby
Oh, wow.
Oh,
together.
yes.
I thought grandma it was amazing, but great grandma and
wow.
great grandbaby now are watching the movie together, which is really interesting.
That's incredible.
It was crazy. So I know with COVID kind of halting basically everything in the world right now, do you have any projects coming up or anything that you're working on that maybe you're going to get started when everything kind of kicks back up, or anything else you'd like to tell the audience about?
Oh gosh, nothing. I mean, our makeup effects studio will probably go to work hopefully in the new year, though there's a few things on the horizon, but nothing really, locked down. It's hard in Hollywood because you have all these people coming together on a set.
Right.
The friends of ours who are working, they're wearing, full PPP and in little pods, pardon me, and just, they say it's pretty miserable, really miserable. And whether insurance companies and all the business side want to take chances on that is really up in the air. But I mean, what I've been doing during COVID is I have a story near and dear to my heart that I've been writing. I'm trying to make it into a TV series. It's not horror, unfortunately, but I'm really gonna, I love to write, and I have a couple of horror scripts that are kind of more like comedy horror, like
All right.
kind of thing. But if that's all I can do right now is stay at home and write, that's what I'm going to do. So I spend
Absolutely.
a lot of my day doing that.
Well, that's awesome. We're about to let you get out of here, Miss Heather, but I just wanted to ask you one more nightmare question.
Okay.
What was your favorite Freddy kill throughout the whole franchise?
Oh,
Because you were in the movies that had the best ones.
you think so? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Tina's kill, iconic. Johnny Depp's kill, Prime Time, the
Every
puppet,
kill in Dream Warriors, which is
Terrence.
one of my favorite movies ever.
Which one?
Every kill in Dream Warriors, which by the way is one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah, no, they were so creative. It's hard to pick a favorite, I would say. But you know which one I really like because my really dear friend. Well, first you have Amanda's in the room, which it's so far beyond all of them that it's in its own class of crazy, scary scenes, and so violent that even today I think it's just one of the best scenes ever done. But
Absolutely.
like the more funny, jokey ones, the ones that are more like tongue in cheek, still horrifying, but I think Brooke Thies with her arms snapping.
Oh, Roach Motel.
That goes as far as funny one-liners. Like, I think that might be my favorite one. And Brooke is such a good friend of mine that to watch her go through that, oh, it's hard. So that would be my pick today. I mean, it changes. It depends on how recently I've seen it, or all of that. So, which ones are you guys going to watch for Halloween?
Oh, I always watch Dream Warriors, just so we're how that goes. Always, at least once a year, I pop in Dream Warriors. So definitely, and the first one as well, obviously.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that hurricane just kind of hit my area, and so in Florida, and so we are like cleaning stuff up right now. I actually had to drive to get on Wi-Fi here today.
How much rain did you get?
Oh, it was about 100-mile-an-hour winds for about 6 or 7 hours just sitting on top of us. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. So
are you in the Panhandle?
Yes, yeah, right in Pensacola. So, but
it looks bad. It looks bad. But what about like the storm surge? Is that bad?
Oh yeah, downtown Pensacola is underwater still right now. So it's pretty bad.
I hear that. Yeah, I actually didn't look at the news today. I was every day somebody
something. Yeah,
the news is not good ever.
Mother Nature is unleashing her fury on us
right.
And everyone has to be safe and just take whatever people tell you to do is just get out. We had our little town here in Malibu burn 2 years ago. We lost about 450, 500 houses here in our town, and people are just now starting to rebuild, and it takes years, and that's what you have to have so much patience and have to help each other a lot. And I was just thinking today, like, how are we going to help the people in California?
Yeah, the whole West Coast. That's crazy. It's just crazy.
It's really, really hard. So everyone just be safe out there, and no trick or treating out here. So it's going to be at home watching our horror movies with our popcorn.
There you go.
That's right.
I like the way you think.
In costume.
Yeah.
Go Nancy. I'd like to see more Nancy Thompsons for Halloween.
I like that.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Just
And
want to say thank you for joining us. With the success of Halloween, hopefully you get a chance to redo Nancy Thompson one more time. If we can get Robert back, we got to get Robert back too. But
I know. I have a feeling like he's sitting at home, like eating bonbons. He's like 400 pounds now. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Hey, he did it for the Goldbergs. He can do it for you. Come on now.
No doubt.
No kidding. I
Right.
know. I know. It's terrible. Okay, let's all keep our fingers crossed, okay?
Yes.
Yes, man.
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
again very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. You be safe out there.
Be
You
safe.
too.
And just want to remind everybody to don't go out there.